Morning, Canyons. How are you guys? Great. All right. So, hey, today we are jumping in to the fifth week of our series, A Famine is Coming. And I'm not sure if you guys have a dog like I do, but I have a dog that constantly wants to tell on herself. Okay? You know what I'm talking about? Like when she was a puppy, she would run upstairs into our playroom and she would grab one of our kids' toys and just chew it up. And when we would get home and we would find her, it's like she can't make eye contact. Anybody like have a dog like this? Now, my dog also does this thing that I'm sure every dog does, but it's like the overwhelming urge to still be reunited with her masters just like is too much. And so her front legs will be running towards us while her back legs are like trying to go off like sideways to run away. Anybody like ever seen this? Now, she still does this, even though she's not like chewing on our kids' toys, but if she throws up or if there's another kind of accident, she doesn't want to make eye contact. And I always look at her and say, this is really awkward for you, isn't it? Right? And it's so funny because I look at her and I have the same thought I think most of you have. It's like, oh, how cute. You feel embarrassment and shame just like I do, right? Like, this is like the reaction we see from a dog, but I don't know, have you ever run into somebody that frankly, like there's a little bit of beef between you and it's just like the most awkward moment? Like you're broke up with a girl and like all of a sudden, like a couple weeks later, you run into her in public and you're like, this is not going to go well for anybody, right? Have you guys ever been there? I have a mentor and a friend who, we both knew this crotchety old pastor, and he told me, he's like, yeah, I actually, when I was in college, I went out with his daughter. And I'm like, well, tell me about that. And he's like, well, it really didn't go well because one night I told him that I'd get her home early, but my car broke down. It was really bad and just like had a big interaction. So like that story just always stuck with me. And a few weeks later, we were at this church in Texas together, and I meet this woman who introduces herself as the daughter of that crotchety old pastor. And I'm like, whoa. In my mind, I'm like, you went out with her. So I found my mentor a little later. I'm like, hey, did you know that she's here? He's like, oh yeah, I knew. And I go, well, have you said anything to her? And he says, no. The last time I talked to her, she said she never wanted to see me again. I'm just trying to honor her wishes, right? But have you guys been in that situation before? Where it's like you run into somebody and it's just, it is awkward and it is bad. We've all been there and there's something magnetic happening. This is gonna be really hard to see because these magnets are small. But magnets, of course, they wanna attach. But if you flip it over and you have like the negative charge with the negative charge, like what happens? They repulse each other, right? They just push far, far away. And so what happens is whenever there is some sort of conflict between you and another person and it's unresolved, there is something magnetic happening, except it's not the thing that's bringing you together, it's the thing that's pushing you apart. Or maybe it is bringing you together, but it's not the flight side of things, it's the fight side of things, where you just like wanna, not like give a good hand, but like you wanna lay hands, right? Like you just want to, you want something to transpire. You want to try and resolve this conflict either through pushing it further away or you want to make it better. So when we go to the story of Joseph in Genesis that we've been going through the last several weeks, here's what has happened, just to catch everybody up to speed. So when Joseph is 17 years old, his brothers attack him, they beat him up, they throw him into a well, and then they have the bright idea, we're gonna sell him into slavery. So he goes all the way to Egypt, where for several years he is a slave in somebody else's home until his master's wife accuses him of rape and he ends up going to prison. So now he's in prison. And one of the prisoners that he ends up having to take care of is the personal butler to Pharaoh. So one night, the butler has this dream. Joseph, empowered by God, interprets the dream, and now the butler is released from prison. Now, 2 years later, after the butler has forgotten him, Pharaoh has a dream, and nobody in the kingdom can interpret it. And the butler remembers there's somebody who can. So he calls on Joseph, and Joseph comes from the prison and interprets Pharaoh's dream. There's gonna be coming 7 years of 7 years of plenty, great harvest, incredible weather. Things are gonna go great for us. Economic expansion, prosperity, you name it. But as soon as that's over, we're having 7 of the hardest years we could ever imagine. 7 years of famine. Things are going to be bad. In exactly the same way that he described it, 7 years of plenty followed by one of the worst famines in history. And Pharaoh actually puts Joseph in charge of the effort to try and save enough food and to save the civilization and the kingdom. And as the famine starts to spread out of Egypt, it moves into the Near East. And lo and behold, those brothers who sold Joseph into slavery are starting to feel the effects of the famine. And so their dad comes to them and says, I have heard that there is food in Egypt. Get up and go. And so they make their way to Egypt, not knowing that even the reason why there is food to be had in Egypt is because of their son and their brother. They make it all the way to Egypt, and lo and behold, the person who greets them is their brother Joseph. Now, they don't recognize him, but he recognizes them. And there's this part of his heart that he wants to be reconciled to his brothers. And as we talked about last week, reconciliation requires trust. You have to trust the other person. So what he does is he sets up a series of tests to see whether or not he can actually trust his brothers again. And in fact, the way he's going to do this is he's going to threaten to keep the youngest brother in prison and letting them go free. Now, if they are going to allow this, what that will prove and show is that these brothers are no different than the ones who beat up and threw Joseph into slavery. But at the last minute, Judah, the 4th oldest brother, stands up and says, absolutely not. You're not going to take our brother. Take me instead. And this is where we pick up today. So as Judah has announced, I am willing to be enslaved for the sake of my little brother, Joseph immediately says, still secret identity to his brothers, everybody out except these men. And so all of Joseph's servants, everybody else that worked in the palace, they vacate the room, and now it's just Joseph and his brothers. And Joseph begins to weep uncontrollably. And word starts going around the palace that something strange is happening in this room. And then in Genesis 45:3, we have Joseph having his very first words to his brothers since they threw him into the pit. He looks at them and says, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers were speechless, as you can imagine. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. Now, we've been riding with Joseph the entire time through this series. We've been looking at basically his story, but let's look at this for a second just from the brothers' perspectives. Here's what we know about them. 22 years ago, they did an unthinkable act. They sold their brother into slavery. They beat him up mercilessly. They had no idea what was going to happen to him. In fact, their original plan was they were going to kill him. But they've been wrestling with this ever since. That this moment of passion of like, let's get rid of him, has turned into this lifetime of regret. And we know this is the case because a little earlier in the narrative, the very first time that Joseph starts to tighten the screws on them in secret, where they don't know that he is their brother, the very first thought they have when things start going wrong is, this is probably because of what we did to our brother. They believe that there's some sort of like cosmic retribution that's happening right now, that karma has come to roost. Like it is the reason why things are going bad. So we know from their perspective that they have been wrestling with this regret and with this guilt ever since. And so suddenly now you have the object of all of your guilt standing right in front of you. Now my guess is that some of us have probably even been there at some point in our life, where we had done something untoward, bad, maybe even illegal in our past, and we just kind of struggle with the idea that things could still work out for us, Like you struggle to think that you could be forgiven. You think that every time you get a flat tire, it's probably because of the things that you did in your past. Or I've even talked to people that they have awful things happen to members of their family. And I'm convinced that the reason why is because, man, when I was in my 20s and I did something that was just like completely wrong. And what we think is like God is just like putting his thumb down and that you are on the receiving end of God's cosmic retribution. And so from their perspective, the brother's perspective, what do you do when the greatest source of guilt and regret from your past has come walking into your life again, and he holds all of the cards? Like, what was Joseph's brothers fearful of? Their jilted brother is now in this position of power to where at a single word, they can be imprisoned, they can be put into slavery, that he can enact any kind of revenge that he wants on them right now, in this moment. He can kill them with one word. But what they don't know is that Joseph has already worked through all of this hurt and this pain. And that what he has done is he has said, I don't need to hold on to this hurt any longer, that I am free from it. And Christian, what I want you to come to know, the thing that will change so much of your life, is that for those of you who are not in the brother's shoes, but in Joseph's shoes, where you have been wronged, that you have been sinned against, that you have had something horrific happen to you, is that freedom is found when you unlock the chains of bitterness. Now, Joseph, he could have enacted revenge, but he doesn't. And here's the secret that Joseph knew, and that all of the happiest, most joyful people in your life know as well, is that forgiveness is, of course, of benefit to the person who is given forgiveness, but its real effect is on the person who gives it. That makes all the difference right there. To see your freedom it's found when you unlock the chains of bitterness. Now, we see this actually really, really clear in the story of this woman by the name of Corrie ten Boom, who during the Second World War, she and her family, they would hide Jewish people from the Nazis until they were eventually betrayed and actually thrown into a horrific concentration camp called Ravensbrück. Now, so what happens, of course, is the war is over and Corrie ten Boom survives, although her sister Betsy does not. And Corrie ten Boom, as a devout Christian, as she gets out of the war, she starts to write books. She starts to speak publicly about the power of forgiveness and about God's love and how incredible his grace can be in our life. So you can imagine the horror that she feels when one day she's speaking to this church in Munich, Germany. And she just gets done talking about God's incredible gift of grace and forgiveness, when after that morning, this man comes walking up toward her. And the thing is, it's clear that he does not recognize her, but she immediately recognizes him. That this is one of the SS guards from Ravensbrück. In fact, he was one who would actually mock the women as they showered. He was one who watched her sister die of starvation. This is a man who really embodied all of the worst experiences that she had in the war. And he comes walking up toward her. He has this big smile on his face, and he extends his hand and he says, "That was an incredible message. How good is it to know that as Christians, we are forgiven by God?" And in that moment, Corrie ten Boom is faced with a decision. What do I do? And she's having all the memories come flooding in, her arm is frozen, she can't lift it, because the memory of her sister, the memory of the indignity of Ravensbrück, it's all come flooding into her mind. And it was like an anchor dropped into the mud, attached to her hand, is the way that she described it. How would you respond in a moment like this? I mean, this is an active participant in your own sister's death. See, my guess is that for most of us, whatever our hurt is, okay, because chances are none of us experience anything quite to the same degree that Corrie ten Boom did. But you have had things that have been done to you, whether it was by a spouse or it was by, an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. Maybe it was somebody in your past, a parent. Like, you've probably had something done to you that was horrific and wrong. And the thing is, you know the right answer. You know that the right thing is, well, I just need to forgive that person. But you don't. And why is that? I think many of us have bought into this lie that our hurt, if we were to give it away, if we were to truly release it and forgive the person who caused it, that somehow we're granting something that is just not fair, that we tell ourselves that this is something that gives me purpose and motivation and this keeps you warm at night. And I think what we do is we curse it, we nurse it, and then we rehearse it. So what we do is we curse the fact that we feel this way. We hate it. We think that it's awful, that we have to go through this, but we don't want to let it go. And what we do is we nurse it. We keep it alive, that as soon as it starts to kind of fade out of existence, we breathe new life into it by rehearsing it, and we replay it over and over in our minds, because ultimately we think that we're not allowed to hand it away. But the truth is, it is killing you. See, what bitterness is like drinking poison, but waiting for the other person to die. The person who hurt you is not affected by your hatred of them. They are not going to be hurt because you hold bitterness in your heart toward them. You are the one who is suffering. You are the one who is feeling it. And so for Joseph, he has completely resolved this in his life. And Joseph's brothers have no idea what journey he has gone on. They have no idea that he has worked this out. In their mind, they think that they are on the verge of being enslaved. They think they're on the verge of being killed, maybe. They are convinced that nothing good is coming on the other side of this conversation. But here's what Joseph says in verse 4. He says, "Please come closer," he said to them, which, you just kind of imagine for a second, those brothers are thinking, no, we're good over here. But it says, so they came closer, and he said again, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt." In case they forgot which Joseph they're talking about. Well, the one that we sold into slavery. But it says in verse 5, "But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place." What I'm about to read next, if you personalize this on any level, it has the potential to completely wreck you. And we'll explain this in a second. Don't be upset. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me into this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. Joseph is not just saying in this moment, "I forgive you." He's stating a very profound theological truth. Their sinful sending of Joseph into Egypt is wrapped inside God's sovereign sending of putting Joseph in place to rescue the world, but not just the world. What is it he said exactly? Oh, ahead of you to preserve your lives. And he keeps going. It says in verse 7, "God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. So it was God who sent me here, not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of this entire palace and the governor of all Egypt." Some of you are not really ready to deal with this today, and I get that. And so if you just want to wrestle with this a little bit, take the time to do it. But this right here, this is a upsetting, contradictory, hard thing to hear. That you don't want to admit it this way, but you think that forgiving somebody is like weakness or just like excusing a wrong. But then I'm not just saying, hey, you should forgive. I'm saying you need to reframe it. And you need to see that quite possibly God has used this to position you for something else. And I want to unpack this a little bit more. Because in your mind, you're thinking, how could God, in all of his goodness, be the one who sent Joseph through slavery, through prison, and put him where he's been separated from his family for the last 22 years? And you're wondering, like, well, how could God actually do these things? And here's the thing, like, there's some basic theological assumptions that we need to establish. One of which is God is not the author of evil. That God never wants to program wrong or evil or sin. He does not do any of those things. So what we're seeing here is that God did not cause the sin, but he captures it. And what he does is he weaves their evil intention and their evil plan into his plan to save this family. Now, the term for this is sovereignty or providence. And we're going to hold in alternating hands two what seem like contradictory sentiments. The first is that God has perfectly orchestrated the world, that nothing happens outside of his purview or his jurisdiction. It happens exactly the way he wants it to happen. That's in this hand. And in this hand over here is a truth that the world is marred by brokenness and sin, that evil happens every single day, and it hurts people that God loves, and it breaks his heart. Both of these are true completely. And many of you are going to wrestle with this for the rest of your life. In fact, there is the thought that, man, if God is all good and he's all powerful, then how can I explain all of the awful things that happen in this world? And the truth is, people have been wrestling with this for thousands of years. It's led some people to the conclusion of, well, I just can't trust God at all. But what I would say to that, and I'm stealing a lot of this from people who are much smarter than me, but if you really want to see just how God can allow two things to be true, even though they seem like they contradict, a very awful thing and his good and perfect plan, look to the cross. See, what you have to recognize is that as Jesus puts himself on the cross, what it certainly means initially is that God cares. That at no point was God like tricked into putting Jesus on the cross. That Jesus didn't get blindsided and he just couldn't weasel out of this one. No, he goes to the cross on his own volition. And what we see is that if he is put on the cross, like there's got to be a purpose and a reason for it. And we know that the night before he's actually even crucified, he's in the garden and he's wrestling with this thought. And one of the things he says is, not my will be done, but yours. And so is it God's will that Jesus would be betrayed and mocked and scorned and crucified? In some sense, yes. But what we also see is that it wasn't God who weighed the weight of sin. Like, it was our sin that put him on the cross. It was our evil. It was our wrong. So Jesus was put on the cross by us, but what we also learned, it was for us that he went to the cross. And to try and piece some of these things together, I don't have a reason why you went through what you did. I don't know why the evils in your past were put on you. I probably don't have a satisfactory answer to that. But what I can say is as we look to what our own Lord and Savior went through, what we know is that he can redeem even the worst of situations. He can bring good things out of the evil plan. That God is writing a story of redemption because he proved that as he wrote a story of redemption out of the cross, and he can write one out of your life as well. Or in other words, nobody will write a better story for your life than God. Nobody will write a better story for your life than God. You have to stop trying to edit the past. Trust the author and let him turn the page. So like I said, Joseph's brothers, they were terrified about what Joseph is going to do next. And in one hand, Joseph has a bucket of gasoline that he can pour this gasoline all over their guilt and all over their shame, and he can ignite this if he wishes, or he has a bucket of water in the other hand. And of course, he chooses to douse their guilt and the flames of their past in water. He extends grace to them. And what I hope that you learn is what Joseph learned as well, and that is, true peace begins the moment you take one step toward grace. So Joseph brings his brothers close, and what he tells them is, guys, we've gone through 2 really hard years of famine, but God has revealed to me that there are 5 more hard years coming. That I'm going to send you home with food right now, but frankly, it's not going to be enough. That a year from now, you're going to run out. A year after that, you guys will be starving, and a year after that, you'll probably be dead. It's not going to be enough. So what you need to do instead, you need to pack up everything you own, grab your wives and your children, get dad, bring all the livestock, bring it here to Egypt. And what he does is he pulls a part of the Nile River basin that is an incredible piece of land, this land called Goshen. And says, this is where you're gonna live, and it's where you set up camp. It's gonna be a place where your kids are gonna grow up. It's a place where you're gonna thrive. It's gonna be a place where so many good things in your life are going to happen. And what Joseph is doing is saying, even though you don't deserve this, I'm giving you grace. They deserved punishment for everything that they did. And what they're receiving instead is care. Joseph to them, like Jesus to us, gives us what we don't deserve. The brothers deserved punishment, but they don't receive it. What they receive instead is the choice land of the Nile. And it's exactly what Jesus does for us as well. So to wrap this story up, what happens is, it says in verse 14, weeping with joy, he embraces Benjamin, and Benjamin did the same. Then Joseph kissed each of his brothers, and he wept over them. And after that, they began talking freely to him. Joseph's act of forgiveness led to what he ultimately wanted, peace in his life. But more than that, it was reconciliation. And the reason why is because freedom is found when you unlock the chains of bitterness in your life. So going back to Munich in 1947, Corrie ten Boom is standing across from this former SS guard. His hand is extended. And what she writes is that in a moment she said, I have to pray. She doesn't say this out loud, but she's thinking this all internally. And she does a quick prayer. And her quick, desperate prayer was simply, Jesus, I cannot do this. I can only raise my hand. I need you to extend the feeling. And what she writes is, as she extends her hand up, and suddenly her hand is interlocked with this man who formerly was an evil and awful man. She writes that it felt like an electrical current shot up through her arm, that a flood of warmth filled her body. And what she realized was that the forgiveness, it wasn't a gift for the guard, it was a gift for herself. Forgiveness was cutting that anchor that had held her back. And she realized that it was actually God's forgiveness and love going through her to this man that provided the forgiveness that she couldn't have possibly mustered on her own. So where do we go with all this? Where do we land? What do we do? Well, I want to speak to 3 different groups of people. I want to talk first to the person who is fighting the story. You've had something wrong happen to you in the past, and you have been overplaying it over and over and over. You're exhausted, you're trying to get past your past, but you're not really sure where. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to drop the pen. This week, find that one page in your life, and I want you to just simply say, I trust the author. You might not know what purpose was behind it and this side of eternity, but trust that nobody will write a better story for your life than God. Those years that you felt like were wasted weren't necessarily wasted, that God can redeem that. That feeling of just bitterness you had because you ended up in this place right here, God can still move you and redeem this moment. You need to drop your pen and trust the author. But also, I want to talk to the person who's been carrying the weight of unforgiveness and bitterness. You are the Corrie ten Boom in the room. Here's what you have to do. You have to cut the chain. See, forgiveness is not a feeling, it is a choice. And what I want to challenge you to do is this week, find a way to get away. Maybe go to your closet or an empty room, or maybe it's just your car, wherever it is. And I want you to make a simple and dangerous prayer. God, for my own freedom, I release this person to you. Except what will be more powerful is don't just speak in generic terms. I want you to actually use that person's name. But God, I release this person to you. As we talked about last week, forgiveness is simply releasing my right to get even. It's I'm not going to hold this bitterness toward them anymore. I'm going to trust God. And finally, I want to talk to the person who this might actually be the hardest step. That there is something between you and another person and you desire reconciliation. And what you need to do this week is you need to initiate it. So maybe you're the Joseph in the relationship where the hurt has been done towards you. You need to initiate the kindness. You need to be the one who says, hey, come close. Or maybe you're the brother and you feel all this shame because you hurt somebody. And what you need to do is you need to stop punishing yourself and accept the grace that God is freely trying to give you. And what you have to trust is nobody, and I mean nobody, will write a better story for your life than God. You can get caught up in just the what ifs and how could this happen and all that, and you struggle with the thought of like, how could something so bad happen to me, a good person? And frankly, you're not gonna really come to grips with most of that on this side until you start moving toward God. And then those steps of walking towards Christ, what you'll see is that he will start to redeem the moment. He will start pulling purpose out of it. He will start to show you exactly why some of these things have happened. And like I said, some of it might not be revealed on this side of eternity, but in the eternity to come. But just trust the author. Look to the cross. Something horrific and wrong that happened to Jesus is why we celebrate. It's why we sing. It's why we have new life. And he wants to extend that same level of purpose to you. So if you would join me in prayer. God, I'm praying right now for the people in this room who are struggling with bitterness, that God, that you would show them that forgiveness is a choice. And that they should choose to release you, or to release that person and trust you, God, that they should drop the pen and follow you. God, I'm praying for those who have been on the giving end, that they're like the brothers, or they are like the guard at Ravensbrück, that they have hurt somebody horrifically. That God, that you would show them that there is nothing in their past that can keep them apart from you. That God, that you would impress upon them the reality that grace is being extended, that God, that you are giving them something that they don't deserve. And the God, that you would forgive them, that you would invite them into a relationship, and the God, that you would save them. In fact, God, I pray for those who need to say yes to you for the very first time, that God, you would put this prayer on their mind and in their heart. That God, I'm asking you to forgive me of my sins and take full control of my life. That I trust you, God. I pray this in your son Jesus' name, amen.